Welcome to the Business Brains and the Bottom Line podcast. My name is Paul Del Vecchio, your host, and my guest today is a gentleman by the name of Bob Del Vecchio. I'll kind of tee it up for you, Bob. Bob and I go way back. He's a Somerville guy like I am, born and bred. He was actually one of my coaches at one point. I played semi-pro baseball, and CIA, in Korea. I'll let you talk about that later, but he got quite the resume. And I think we have a ton of fun things to talk about and interesting things to talk about with Bob. And it's going to be a kind of a wide-ranging conversation here, but it's going to be fun. But welcome to the show, Bob.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Yeah.
It's really a pleasure to see you again.
Yeah.
We're going to get into this interview and this meeting, and I know it's going to be a lot of fun because we had a lot of fun. So when you have a lot of fun that you can think back about and talk about, then we're going to have some laughs. I know we are.
Yeah, no question. So, like I said, Bob, you're a Somerville guy like me. You're a little older than me, I think.
12 years.
Yeah. So, it's one thing about Somerville guys that kind of, no matter what age group, we have this bond. I don't know what it is, but we all come from the same place, same upbringing, and it's a pretty special place, if you ask me. Didn't have a lot of money. But we had a lot of good friends, a lot of good family, and it was a great place to grow up in my mind.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. I mean,
Yeah.
Growing up in Somerville, people say you grow up. In Somerville, you fight up.
Yeah.
You don't. In the late 50s and the early 60s, up until the early 70s, it was, fight your way from corner to corner.
Yeah. Well, I always tell people I was an athlete. I wasn't like a tough guy, quote unquote. But you had to have a certain level of toughness to grow up where we grew up, right? You had to fight eventually. I mean, it was just inevitable, right?
Well, definitely. If you could leave back then, every neighborhood had a luncheonette, had a coffee shop, and a grocery store all in one. So you could leave your neighborhood and you'd walk to another neighborhood and you'd run into the kids that live in that area, and they want to know where you're going, what are you doing, and then next thing you know, you're in a fight.
Yeah.
So everywhere you went, until they got to know you,
right,
you're in a fight. But if you could handle yourself and they knew you, then they didn't bother you. And that was one of my, I don't know the word I'm looking for, but I could handle myself, put it that way. I didn't take much. I didn't let anybody push me around.
So, Bob, you got into coaching. Well, let's back up a little bit. You went to high school, you get out of high school, and you go in the military. You go in the Army.
Well, first, let me talk about meeting you.
Oh, boy.
Okay. I first met you when you were about, 14, 15 years old, playing, you were on the All-Star team.
Yeah, playing.
That was the first time that we really had any interaction. Other than that, I was the president of the league, and I oversaw everything. I knew most of the kids. And you were a very sarcastic young man, but your sarcasm came with a smile and some English. So you really didn't take offense to what you said, but you were a smart aleck, and you were a great kid. You were one of the best kids in the league. If I had to pick 10 of the best boys in the league, you'd be in the list.
Well, thanks, Bob. I appreciate you saying that. And I think that's when
I'm
you
not
say that.
trying to kiss up to you, Paul.
No, I know.
What I'm trying to do is I want to get this information out because I've watched your podcasts in the past and I really enjoyed them. And I really enjoyed the one with Bobby Martini. I saw the second one, but I didn't get to see the first one, but I will. But you and I created the bigger bond before the pool parties and stuff with the team.
Yep.
When we had that game in Lexington, it was a hot day. It was in the summer. And it was really a bad day for me and apparently a bad day for you. I didn't think you were doing your job behind the plate the way you should. So why don't you pick it up from there?
Yeah, so I'll give you my recollection of it. And Bob, we haven't really never talked about this for 40 years. I really,
not really.
It's something but it's something I've always thought about. And as
never left my mind.
Yeah, it's something, not one of our prouder days. So I'm catching. It was a first and third situation, and the catcher's job on the guy in first base goes, the catcher's job is to make the guy in third stop, right? Like you come up throwing, but you're looking out of the corner. You don't want him to get a running start. So if you throw to second, he scores. Well, I didn't do that. You were a little bit torqued at me, I could tell, and didn't say anything between innings, and it was my bad, no question. It happened again later in the game, and you kind of yelled at me, make sure you make them stop. You were kind of sarcastic to me. I said a few sarcastic things back to you, and I could tell you were fuming. I don't really remember all the details.
Well, I was kind of wondering whether you were going to look at the ball or pick it up.
Yeah.
A couple of times.
After the inning, my recollection is you came running straight at me.
Yeah.
Right? Is that accurate right there?
Well, I don't know if I was running, but I was walking pretty fast.
Yeah, you came at me.
It was a beeline.
And so, by my recollection, and you kind of reminded me of something that I said. I forget what was said, but you said something along the line. I said something to you along, if you can do any better, and I shoved my mitt in your gut or something like that. And that's when you took a swing at me.
Yeah, I grabbed your shirt right by up here because you were like 6 inches taller than me at least.
Yeah.
Right. So I tried to pull you down near me and do an overhand right. No punches ever connected. And then if they did, they may have been body hits or pushes.
Yeah. Plus there was a big
as soon as we started swinging, everybody jumped in and broke us up right away.
Well, but, hey, Bob, for the record, I can say this now. I would have kicked your butt if they let us go, just so you know. I'm just saying that now, 40 years later.
Well, everybody has a dream, and it's good that you have one.
Yeah, there you go.
Because that's your dream then. Maybe now, but not then. But anyways,
no, Bob, you were a pretty stout guy back in those days. You would have been a tough out, that's for sure.
Well, it was one of the most embarrassing moments of my life.
Yeah, I wasn't too proud of it either. I'll be honest. I know that you'd gone over to the Lexington team after the game and kind of apologized, and word started to filter through the league. The next game, I think I told you, we were playing Augustines, I think, and Joe DiSarcino was at the plate, and he looked back at me and was like, I heard about what happened in Lexington, and he kind of gave me that disgusted look. Again, I was not one of my prouder moments. Two hot-headed Italian guys just it got the best of us. But
hey, Paul, we went once. The coach from Wakefield, I can still see his face. I can't remember his name. He said to me that he was so impressed with the Red Sox that we were 1-18. Right, 1 win, 18 losses. In the last game of the year, we were playing at Dever Park in Malden. We had 18 guys at the game. And what's his name from Lexington couldn't get over it. But that's how the team was. Everything was close. We were all close-knitted. Everybody knew everybody. We were all from Somerville. And if you weren't from Somerville and I brought you in, everybody melded well. Everybody meshed good. It was a lot of camaraderie. And I have a lot of friends with that. And I still get a lot of text messages from people saying, thank you for what you did. And, they get older and they start reminiscing and they start thinking of what happened back then. And they become appreciative, moving forward, growing up in Somerville, that was, like we said before, you fought your way up from corner to corner.
Yeah.
I lived on Waterhouse Street. That was the last street in Somerville on the left before you crossed over Route 16, our Whitebrook Parkway into East Arlington. And at the top of my streets, there was the Marquis Cafe on one side and the Terminal Cafe on the other. And in the Marquis Cafe, Sal Spalinga, who was a famous in Somerville, was the bookie. And he was just starting out because I was only 11 years old.
Yeah.
And I was shining shoes, and that's how I got to know Sal. But we'll talk about Sal at another time, but he was a great guy in Somerville. And,
I'm glad we got that story about us, Bob. And, I thought about that over the years with regret, right? Like, I don't think I handled it perfectly, and I think you feel the same way. So it's good that we could get that out and kind of make amends. And we became very close after that, Bob, actually.
Yeah, we did. That's right. We did.
Once we aired it out, we became close,
Yeah, and you know something, back then when I was young, every time I had an argument or a fight with someone, we always ended up being closer friends than when we started. You just happen to understand each other better, I guess, when you let go.
So,
Sal was the bookie on the corner. I played baseball as much as I could. I'd play 5 or 6 teams in the summer.
Yeah.
At one time. And my mother was always washing uniforms. Because I always had to have a clean uniform. I wouldn't, no dirty uniforms.
Yeah.
But that's how I met Sal, and he was a really great guy.
Yeah, well, he became one of the sponsors years later. Years later, he became one of the sponsors of our team. I didn't know this until recently. He told me that. I did not know that.
Yeah, Sal always, every year, gave me $750 for the $800 for the Red Sox.
Yeah, and that was a lot of money back then. So you're talking probably 40 years ago, right?
Frank DePinto Oil, Frank would give me $500. They knew I was paying for it out of my pocket. They knew we didn't have a sponsor. I didn't want to put anybody's name on my uniforms.
Yeah. So
let's back up. Too, I always had nice cars. I had a Feeling GTA with a 390 in it, and I had to sell it because I went into the service in 1966.
Yeah. So that's the next phase of your life, Bob. Let's get to that. You go in the Army. How old were you when you went in the Army?
18.
Now, were you drafted or you enlisted?
I enlisted. Okay. I had to get out of Somerville. I had to get out. I had no father. My father died when I was 13 in my arms, and I had nobody to. I wasn't doing. I was going the wrong way, and I could see it. I wasn't happy. I was a very unhappy young man at the time, so I joined the Army. With a bunch of other unhappy people.
Yeah.
So I got into the Army, and everything I did in Somerville, all my skills, where I was able to transcend to the military service.
Yeah. Now, you said you were actually you were in during the Vietnam era, but you were actually in Korea. Is that correct?
South Korea, right? Yeah. I was in South Korea for almost 2 years.
And
it's a 13-month tour,
right?
But I extended because I wouldn't have to be reassigned when I got back to the States. But my battalion commander couldn't find a replacement, so I was extended for another 6 months in South Korea. So I ended up being there for close to 2 years.
Yeah, that was typical.
Was holy hell, because that was like 3 Christmases I missed from home.
Yeah, my cousin Frankie Willie was in Vietnam, and he did the same thing. He did his 13-month tour in Vietnam, and then he re-upped so that when his tour was up, he could go straight home. He didn't have to be reassigned.
Well, in my case, I had an interesting military career. And then my military career was continued after I got out of the Army by greed on my part. So I get into the service and I go to the reception station, and there's like 10 barracks with 40 guys in each barrack. And when they had nothing to do because it was, for some reason, they weren't doing any moving. We were locked down, so to speak. So they decided they want to play football. So they're going to play football, and they're going to have flag football games. So they say, use your socks for the flags. So everybody uses their green long socks for the flags. I use my black band long, the shorter, and they're slipperier, right? So I use those. And we won the championship. Now, I took all these guys that didn't know anything about football. They knew how to block, but they didn't know whole numbers. They didn't know plays. They didn't know anything about any discipline or mechanics about football. So we won the championship. I led the team. I was approached and asked if I wanted to go into a division of the military that is very odd. And by odd was, I ended up going in, and I was an embedded CIA agent. I was in A Company, 2nd Battalion, 32nd Infantry, 7th Division. I was with the 213th Military Intelligence Battalion, but I was embedded with an infantry battalion with another guy. And what we did is we chased North Korean infiltrators up and down the west coast of Korea with a joint task force of South Korean military. There were 26 of them and 3 of us. And we mostly were there to supervise and assist them. We had the military might. They had the personnel. So we had to go out into the villages, and bribe people. We get $10,000 a month from the CIA. I'd go and pick it up. I worked for a guy named Bob Barrett. He was my CIA handler when I was in South Korea. And I would he lived in normal civilian housing out in the country. See, South Korea is nothing like anybody around here has ever seen. You have to go to someplace where there's nothing. That's South Korea. There's a hole in their backyard where they go to the bathroom, and they use that to fertile their fields. They throw all their trash in the gutter out in front of their hooches, and it runs out and down the street because they have like a trench. And it's just a dirty, horrible place to be if you're not in the main city.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, the cities are pretty modern right now. I know some people that have been over there, and it's actually pretty nice over there.
When I was leaving, they just started building a 4-lane highway.
Yeah.
The first one that was going through the country. So we would use it from section to section, and we'd be going 45 miles an hour. The next thing you know, up in front ahead of you, there'd be this old papasan with a kimchi cart and an ox, and he'd be in the highway walking. And you'd be in a Jeep doing 45 miles an hour. So, that was kind of crazy at the time. So we had to go out and bribe I bought goats, chickens, turkeys, ducks, horses, ponies, ox, water buffalo, you name it. I've given money to Korean farmers to buy it, to get information.
Right.
We'd get the information, turn it over to the South Korean intelligence, and they'd take care of it. Usually the people would disappear. They didn't mess around. It was like Vietnam. As a matter of fact, South Korea is still a combat zone. It's under a truce right now, but it's still a combat zone. So anybody that goes there is going to a combat zone, but may not be in actual combat.
Sure.
Not everybody is in combat. You got to be up on the DMZ. Now, when I was there in 67, 68, and 69, there was a lot of infiltration across the DMZ. And that's when they had the Second Korean conflict, when 50 Korean commandos crossed the Imjen River to attack the Blue House in Seoul to try and kill the president of South Korea. And we ended up killing 49 of them, and one of them was left to live. He surrendered. And once he got out of the hospital, he became a South Korean citizen, and he lives in South Korea up until, the last time I got any information was a few years ago. I was watching TV, and they had a story about him, and he was still living in South Korea, and he was one of the commandos. So we would go out, and I'd use up the money, $10,000, bribing, buying. And if I came back, I had to have $500 for the company commander, $500 for first sergeant, $500 for Larry, $500 for me. So that's $2,000 right away out of the 10. So we had 8 to work with. And we did. And if we had any money left over, we turned it in. And we'd always turn money in so they wouldn't think that we were taking any. And it wasn't like very strict accounting. It was a room
no doubt,
full of money.
Yeah,
and it was unbelievable. But I didn't realize the brevity of what I was doing. During my training, I was never where I was supposed to be. We were always moved around to different locations, and my mother would think I'd be in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. I was at Fort Meade in Maryland, taking intelligence classes. We were going from base to base, taking up different classes and getting ready to move over to South Korea to take care of this. And then I ended up going to Fort Belvoir, where the Central Intelligence Agency headquarters was. That's where I got my ID. So for 2 years, that's what I did. I chased North Korean infiltrators. We captured 111 of them. 6 of them were neutralized by the American squad, and the rest of them were taken care of by the South Korean Joint Task Force. And they didn't take prisoners. They questioned them for about 45 minutes. And if they didn't get anything out of them they didn't like, I'd hear a pop, and that'd be the end of that one. So there's usually be 4 to 6 of them that would come in at a time.
Yeah.
So they'd kill them and bury them where they fell.
Nice.
They'd dig a hole, and that was the end of them. So I did that, and I had it made in South Korea. Believe me, Paul, if you watch those movies about people in the military that had it made, I had it made. I had my own room. I had a Jeep, right? And if the first sergeant or the company, excuse me, my mouth's getting dry. If the company commander or the first sergeant wanted to go anywhere, they wanted me to take them because I was there longer than anybody else. And I knew all the shortcuts, and I knew all the routes to go to different places. Because all we did was drive around to different observation posts, command posts, different bases. There's not big bases. When I was there wasn't a lot of big bases in South Korea. But now they do have a big base, and then they got satellite bases. But before, when I was doing it, was observation posts. It's like I had to walk around the whole base and take pictures from the mountains. And from one area, you could see all the Hercules missiles in the whole base. And I sent those pictures into battalion headquarters. And 20 days later, they were building an observation post and closing off that whole part of the mountain so they couldn't get up to see it any further. So I ended up getting out in 1969. I fly back to Fort Lewis, Washington. The plane touches down at McCord Air Force Base. I walk down the gangway to the tarmac. I get down on my hands and knees and I kiss the earth, and I swear that I would never leave this country again as long as I live, and I haven't. I've never been to Mexico. I've never been to Canada. I don't want to go nowhere outside of the United States. There's no place like home. There's no place like home.
America takes a bad rap, but it's a great country.
I got mustered out at Fort Lewis, Washington, and I wasn't in a good place. I was in a bad place, and I didn't want to go home. I didn't want to come back to Boston, so I went down to Los Angeles, and I stayed a week with my uncle there. I went to Mountain View, California, and I stayed 2 weeks with my cousin there. And then I went back to my uncle's in Los Angeles, and I stayed there. And I just woke up one morning and I said, Uncle Arthur, I want to go home. So we booked a flight on American Airlines, and took me to the airport. I got on the plane, flew back home. I was going to get a cab, and this lady said to me, where are you going? I said, Somerville. She goes, I'm going to Arlington. We can split a cab. I go, okay. So we got a cab together and stopped at my house on Waterhouse Street before it went to Arlington, and I wanted to give her money. She wouldn't take any money from me because I was in uniform. So I got the ride home. And we didn't lock our doors in Somerville.
Yeah.
Our doors were always unlocked. We didn't even have a key to my front door at my house that I remember. And it was about 11:30 at night, and I walked in and opened the door, and I'm home. And it's the first time I saw my mother in over 2 years. And it was quite a happy reunion. So
sure, I bet she was happy to see you.
I'm living the high life in Somerville again, back out of the service. So walking around, my chest out.
So you get back, and so as you started. This is when I kind of started to know you. A few years after that, you were working for the phone company.
Yeah.
Right. And unbeknownst to me at that time, I'm just finding this out recently that you were actually working for the CIA as well. How did you get? So I'm assuming your CIA connections in the Army helped you get the CIA connections in the United States, and kind of
my CIA.
I don't know what
my CIA. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say. I mean, well, you can explain it, but what did you actually do for the CIA, and what was your title? Like,
When title. I really never thought of that title, but when I got home, I was just kind of like laying around for a few weeks, visiting people. I remember I went up and seen Sal. He says, where's your uniform? I said, I took it off. He goes, go home and put it on. I had to go home, put my uniform home. Went back down Winter Hill. Lisa's, Mama Lisa's Winter Hill Bakery. Sal was out front. I pulled up.
Sure.
I had my uniform. I got out. We took pictures with my uniform, and then I went back home. And this was this is like a week after I got out.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting there, and I get a call. My mother says, "Is somebody on the phone for you?" It was back when you had one phone.
Yeah.
In one location. I go, who? And she goes, "It's Bobby Rarrett." I go, "Who?" Hello, hey, Bob. I go, "Yeah." "Hi, Bob Barrett." "Bob Barrett from South Korea?" "Yeah." I go, "Oh, what are you doing?" He goes, "How you doing?" I go, "I'm doing good. I just laying around, relaxing. What's up?" "Well, you want to go to work?" I go, "No, I'm not coming back to South Korea for nothing. No way." He goes, "No, no, 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 no. You can work in Boston." I go, "For who?" He goes, "You work for us." "CIA?" He goes, "Yeah." "Hey, doing what?" He goes, "Meet me." So
It's like a scene. This sounds like it's a scene from a movie almost, Bob. You know?
well, yeah, it kind of was if you live in it. So
Yeah.
I meet him at the Waldorf. It was Mike's Pizza, I think, in Davis Square, changed from the Waldorf. So I meet him at Mike's in Davis Square, and he tells me that they need somebody to tap phones at Harvard and MIT and at the other colleges in the Boston area, and as far out west as Wellesley and stuff. So I don't understand it, but apparently with the Vietnam protesting and the protesters, the CIA is watching people. So I said, "Does it pay?" He goes, "Yeah, $500 a week." Now, I was making $98.50 a week at the phone company. Now here's the CIA wants to give me $500 a week to tap phones. So I said to them, "How am I going to get in to tap the phones? And who's going to train me?" He goes, "This is the one catch." So I'm waiting for the other foot to drop. And he goes, "You have to go to work for New England Telephone." I go, "Doing what?" He goes, "They'll train you." "Doing what?" "They'll train you." I go, "Okay, all right." He goes, "Trust me." He says, "As soon as you graduate, you start getting paid." So the splicing school I went to was 4 weeks. It was up at Hobbs Court in Arlington. Telephone company had a big location up there with garages for the trucks. And they had 12 telephone poles planted in an area where they taught you how to climb poles, put the spurs on your ankles.
Sure.
Just like like a lumberjack, the same thing.
Yeah.
You climb. They taught us how to climb up poles. We'd climb up the pole. We'd belt in, and then we'd play basketball. We'd throw basketballs to each other, move around the pole, get comfortable, using the spurs in the pole, learning how to not fall out, because if they cut out, you can slide down the pole, and people have, and they just get nothing but splinters if it's an old pole. Because of all the gaff marks that are on it. So I got trained. I got trained as a splicer, but now I know how to handle telephone wires and how to splice them and direct them and do just about anything you want. I used to do, we'll talk later another time, but I would climb poles and where I used to live and listen to people talking on the phone just because I had nothing to do. So getting back to my friends with the CIA. So I lost my train of thought. Okay. I'd get a call and they'd give me some numbers, and the numbers all meant, cable, what cable it was. All the telephone cables are all numbered, 20-18. So they give me the cable number. Then they would give me the pair number. So the cables would come in any size from 5 pair to 2,700 pair. So you had to know what pair that this line was on. So you'd get the information, go to the telephone room at the university if they had one, or a main frame where they'd have on the wall where all the wires would connect.
Yeah.
And I'd go to that phone and I'd put an inside wire lead on it and I'd run it out through the rafters and I would leave it hanging with a tag. And that's what I would do. And I did that for 9 years. I was doing 6, 8 a week. I had to do my telephone work too. I wasn't given a telephone job and not do anything. I had to work for the telephone company.
Yeah. How long did you work for the telephone company? How long did you work for the New England? How long did you work for them?
20 years.
Okay.
So
you now was the phone company in on it, Bob, that you were working for the CIA as well?
Yeah, well, I was just going to get to that.
Okay.
I would get caught. I got caught out of my area. I was in Wellesley and I was supposed to be in Cambridge. And a foreman took my number down off my truck. And when he went back to his office, he looked it up and he said, "The hell is a Cambridge Somerville truck doing in Wellesley?" So they come to me and they say to me, "What are you doing in Wellesley?" And he says, "I had to work." "You didn't give you a job in Wellesley." I says, "Talk to your boss." So goes talks to his boss. His boss talks to his boss. So in the phone company, they went first line, a second line, a third line, a fourth line, a vice president. So when it got to the fourth liner, it came back, "Don't worry about it, ever." So after that day, no one ever asked me where I was, what I was doing, and why I was there. So I had pretty much free reign.
Yeah.
And I went from the splicing department to the service technician department because I didn't like manholes. So I started working fixing phones in houses, but still doing what I had to do for the CIA. One of my jobs, and this is one I'll never forget, I had 2 phones to do, 2 lines to do, and I couldn't do them from the frame room, so I had to go up to, in Harvard University, they have the lecture halls, and 1 or 2 professors, whatever, they'd have a pedestal down front, and then there'd be the theater type of seating where it goes up.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting on the floor in an access point. It's about this big, and it's on the brass plate. You've probably seen them on floors. There'd be a brass plate that they unscrew and you access it, and you put wires in there that run through. So I'm sitting there tapping these 2 phones, and the 2 guys, professors, on my left is Dershowitz. What's his first name?
Alan Dershowitz.
On my left is Alan Dershowitz, young guy, very young guy. And on my right is a guy named Lawrence Traub. Now, I really didn't know who they were, but I found out that Alan Dershowitz and Lawrence Traub, he's one of the foremost authorities on the U.S. Constitution at Harvard University. He's been there ever since. He's still at Harvard. And Dershowitz is associated with Harvard, too. Dershowitz used to fly the same plane as my brother, so I used to see his name in the pilot logbook. Dershowitz would take the plane out. I would go flying with my brother and scared to death. My God, was I scared. That's the most scaring thing ever. So I'm sitting there and I'm talking to them, and they're asking me, "What's it like to work for the phone company?" And I'll say, "Oh, you meet a lot of people, you go into a lot of houses." And I was kind of figuring it out. I think I've been in about 25,000 different houses over my career.
Wow.
And so I'm doing the job. I finish it up. So I send the wires down the conduit. I go down in the basement. I grab the wires. I tag them. And I go back upstairs. I tell them, "Okay, your phones are all fixed. You're all set." And I leave. And basically that was what I did for close to 9 years until I think it was Nixon when they stopped everything to do with Vietnam. Anything and everything. The CIA is not supposed to spy on American citizens. CIA is for foreign citizens. So when they had this crackdown and they found out that the CIA was spying on all these people, they ended it. And they came to me and he says, "It's over. We're not going to do it anymore." I says, "Well, what am I supposed to do?" He says, "Well, you got almost 10 years at the phone company." He says, "1 more year, you'll be vested. You'll have a pension." He says, "You can stay there if you wanted." I go, yeah, but he goes, I won't tell them anything. He goes, well, they won't know nothing. He goes, you'll be golden for the rest of the time you're here. So I said, okay. And I was. That's why I could get to the games. That's why I would take my telephone truck to the games. I would even park it in center field and Trum while we were playing. So I really had the run of New England Telephone for a while, and I really enjoyed it. And I know there was a lot of hostility amongst my colleagues because I got away with a lot more than they did. And I had the same problem in Korea with other junior NCOs and stuff, that I didn't have to do this and I didn't have to do that. And why didn't I have to do all the stuff that they had to do? And the company commander would tell them, it's none of your business why. He does what he does because that's his job. And when I got my service records, when I started to get anxious from military service, they call it PTSD. 5 or 6 pages came totally blacked out.
Really?
Not a word on them. Just totally blacked. Yep. And I got them here. I have the records here. And I went to the VA. They diagnosed me with PTSD. I went through all that. I was really losing it because I had stopped doing everything. I wasn't doing real estate. I wasn't doing mortgages anymore. I wasn't doing construction. So I got back into horses. And the horses really talked me down off the cliff.
Nice.
Because I was pretty close to killing myself, going suicide. And the horses moved me in a way that it just made my life a lot better. Now, I'm a peer counselor for the VA. We do group therapy. Here at my house, we have what's called the Wichita Veterans Wellness Center, where the horses that I have work with the veterans. So it's horses helping veterans with PTSD, or we also have group for veterans who have issues. And we have about 1 or 2 groups a month. We haven't had one for 2 months because I've been sick and I had surgery 4 weeks ago. But that was most that I could remember from being there. But there were firefights, and there was weapons discharged, and there were people killed. But that's not what I want to talk about, and that's not what you want to hear either. It's
yeah, it's just, to me, it's all about hearing your story, Bob. I think you've got, like I said, I've known you a lot of years, but I'm just finding out about things you did. I always knew you were into something. You had some businesses and this, but I didn't quite know what. All I know is I showed
$500 a month to $500 a week to $1,000.
Yeah,
eventually.
Yeah, you were very generous to us players, Bob. I will say that. I mean, we did the cookouts at I think it was your brother's house. We had horses. Remember those? Very generous to us. So I want to thank you for your time. And
God, it was Paul. Best time of my life was working with the boys, and some of them stay in touch, some of them don't. They had their own lives. One of my pet players has a house on Malibu, drives a Ferrari, went to UMass Lowell, got his engineering certificate, got a job out in California, went to work for this big company. Stock kept splitting and splitting and splitting, and he kept getting richer and richer and richer.
Nice.
He's doing great. And there's another one that played for me, multimillionaire, living in Florida, living the life. But none of them send me any money. I bought these kids gallons and gallons of milk, dozens and dozens of donuts. No one ever sent me a buck.
Terrible.
But they do stay in touch, and it was always a lot of fun. And the best memories of my life were Somerville Babe Ruth League. I took over being the president in '73, and you never paid a dime to play. You played for free because we made enough money so everybody could play for free. Nobody had to go canning. Nobody had to stand out in traffic. Nobody had to sell chocolate bars and candy bars.
Yeah, when I played Pop Warner, Logan Post was kind of our sponsor, and we used to have to do that canning and raffles, pain in the ass. I hated doing that stuff.
That's the first thing I stopped, was getting the kids out of the street, because I did canning. I know what it was like, and it was dangerous.
It was. I'll tell you right now. I remember on by Dilboy Field. I remember it was canning one day, and I got stuck in the middle, and this car's whizzing by me in both directions. I couldn't get off. I mean, I could have easily been killed. I was probably 12 years old at that time.
That was probably Broadway and Aloysburg.
Yeah.
We would have four, we would have 4 kids there.
Yeah.
4 to 6 kids there canning. And we take all that to the at the time it was the City Bank, the Somerville City Bank. I can't think of the name of it.
Yeah, and I remember they'd make us wear our uniforms when we did that, right? The Pup One or whatever.
Yeah, everybody wore their uniform. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, good times, Bob. So I do have one question for you. Any famous people that you bugged there? I know you mentioned Dershowitz, but name drop a few other people that you actually bugged their offices. And I won't tell anybody. Just between me and you right here. No one else will know.
I got to be honest with you, Paul. I never got names. I just got a cable number and a pair. Cable and pair. I would go in, identify the cable and pair, hook up the inside wire, which was the tap, run that to a location and just leave it hanging with a tag on it.
And someone else would come in and actually
connect it to a room.
Yeah.
And they would monitor those people. And they were monitoring a lot of people during the Vietnam era.
Yeah.
But there were battles, there were gunfights, but it's a long time ago. It's hard to remember a lot of things.
Yep.
And a lot of things you don't. Another thing I'll never forget is traces flying up all over the place. And when we got in firefights, that's one of the scariest things, is ricochets.
Yeah.
You know what a tracer round is, right? It lights up.
I do.
You see the tracer hits the rock right next to you. Bang, goes straight up in the air. I mean, it's scary stuff. I mean, I never told my mother what I was doing because I know she would have died. And we weren't supposed to tell anybody. I got 2 letters that were censored and sent back to me, told me not to write them. I had some photographs that they took from me, taken from the top of the mountain down on the post. But yeah, it was a great time. Getting back to Somerville, Babe Ruth and you, I happened to be going through YouTube and I came across you and Bobby Martini and I started watching that. And it was so entertaining. And then from then on, I just kept looking at all the rest of them, and it was really, really great. And I really appreciate you asking me to come on here.
Yeah, no, and thanks. You know, we had kind of connected a few years ago. I wasn't really active on social media, but I'm glad that we got the chance to reconnect and kind of, talk about some old times. I look back at them fondly now, of course, and it was a great place to grow up, and I appreciate everything you did for us, Bob. I know you took a lot of money out of your own pocket to sponsor the teams that I played on, and I appreciate it.
The first year I left Babe Ruth, it was like 1981. I made $22,000 more than the last year because I was working overtime again.
Yeah.
But that's the type of sacrifices that I made, and I'm not patting myself on the back because we had coaches that they made the same sacrifices.
Right.
I wasn't alone. And I would say if anybody was to be congratulated about the success that we had at the Somerville Babe Ruth when we were doing it, has to go to Pat Uglietta and Jerry Coviello. Those 2 guys worked harder. They worked in the background more than anybody. And Pat Uglietta, he got the bingo going. His wife's family owned Mari Flooring on Kent Street in Somerville. And once Pat got involved with Somerville Babe Ruth, we never had a problem with money again. He took care of it. So Pat Uglietta, Jerry Coviello, Jerry Murphy, Kevin Tebow, Butch Betke.
Yeah, I remember all those guys, actually. They were obviously
a lot of other guys that they made the league.
Yeah.
I did 10 years in the league.
Yeah.
From when I got out of the service until I opened the restaurant in New Hampshire, and I turned the Somerville Red Sox over to Mark Sullivan and Alex Maisel.
Yep.
And the Intercity League gave them a hard time because they couldn't find a sponsor, but they never came back to me and told me that. If I knew that, I would have given them the money to keep the team in the league.
Yeah.
But they never told me that.
Yeah,
so I didn't know. And I had opened up another restaurant. I was busy too then.
All right,
and
Bob,
this has been great.
Go ahead.
This has been great talking with you, getting on here and sharing these stories. There are better stories. I just can't remember them. I used to ask my mother, Ma, why are you crying? And she said, when you get older, you'll understand.
Yeah.
I understand now, Paul.
Yeah.
I
hear that a lot.
I think of the times, I think of the boys, I think of the friends and all the acquaintances and everything we did. You can't buy what we did.
Yeah.
You can't buy it.
I'm still friends with all my buddies from Somerville. We're still on, even though I live in Texas now, Bob, I'm still in great, John Reedy's one.
Well, I often wondered where you went, and it might have been John or somebody else had told me that you don't like social media and you're not on it that much. And then I noticed you were on Facebook, and then we hooked up, we friended, but we didn't send the stupid messages back and forth like other people do.
Yeah.
We kind of kept it on a, so much like a business-like level.
Sure.
Where you weren't interested in social media that much back then as you are now. And I'm glad to see the change.
Yeah, no, I've connected with a lot of people I haven't seen in a long time. College friends, Somerville friends, just business associates.
How good I feel when I see somebody like you that has done so well for themselves and has made it and is successful, and they're doing it on their own, and you don't have any help in your arms or down your throat. And I'm talking about drugs and all that shit. We lost a lot of players to that. Lost a lot of my boys to
people,
drugs.
No question.
It was a lousy time back then, but it's now. Let's see what we can do with getting the word out on the Boston Gang Wars.
Yeah, we'll get Sia to help you with that. So
I'm telling you, that's a story that needs to be told.
No doubt.
Never been. You're talking about 19 murders before Buddy McLean was killed.
Yeah.
And there's stories there.
Yeah. So, all right, Bob, we'll end on that note.
Shout out to Bobby Martini. Bobby.
Yeah. We'll end on that note, Bob, and we'll see what we can do about the gang wars. I've always thought that too. So,
we're going to do something.
Yeah.
We're going to do something, and
that's a wrap. Go ahead, Bob.
I said we'll do the trailer on your podcast.
Okay, sounds
and then
good.
We'll work out together when we get going. But right now we got a lot of footwork to do and a lot of research to do.
Yeah.
But when I started looking into this, there's so much research online now that it's going to be a lot easier than it would have been 5 or 6 years ago to do it. So
no question.
There's another kid, Robbie Scioli. Do you know him?
No.
Bobby Scioli's son. Bobby Scioli played. Bobby and I started playing baseball together when we were 12. He played CYO for St. Pauli Caps. I played CYO for Immaculate Conception. So we've been friends since we were 12 years old. So good 60 years. And his son, Robbie, is very interested in the Boston Gang Wars. And we talked about it 6 years ago. We were going to do something. And then after I saw that episode with Martini, I got all excited about it again. And I brought out all the information. And Robbie and I have been talking about how we're going to start it up again. But we will. There's a trailer going to be coming out in 6 months or so.
Cool. All right, Bob. Well, thanks again for being on the show. And that's a wrap for another edition of the Business Brains and the Bottom Line podcast.
Thanks, Paul. God bless you. God bless the USA and all our men in service.
Ditto.
Thank you.